Canal. Bigger teams are poaching up players from smaller teams, and fans are losing connection to their players in their community teams. We think that we can move towards solving these problems to an extent. But firstly, on some framing. What does accomplished mean? It means that you probably play in a team, in a league, and you're good at your own level, and you're not probably just on the bench, you're scoring maybe in football a few goals or getting some scores in different sports. But what does professional mean? It means you're simply paid at the level you play this sport has. And we think that 5 years for a player, an athlete, is a long time. It's usually a third of their career, and it's a meaningful time for them. So our model is as follows. The league will probably track how you do, are you an accomplished player, and then after 5 years you will get some sort of yearly paycheck from them for your efforts. And how much money? Probably enough to matter for the player, and it will probably differ from league to league. But if you change teams, you will now have to wait 5 years again to get this money. With that in mind comes our first argument about better sports experience. Firstly, context. Currently, what do the leagues look like? We see that bigger teams are getting stronger and stronger. They scoop up players with the vast amounts of money they have better facilities, they have lots of scouts looking around. Why is this true? Firstly, they just have more sponsors and investments because they are successful teams and companies want to advertise with them. They have lots of viewers, they have lots of fans. This means that they have a lot of money to scoop up lots of those players. And secondly, they win a lot of tournaments where they get prize money from. Pretty simple. But this means that small teams can compete with those bigger teams less and less, because sports is a zero-sum game. One team wins and one team loses. Now, as the stronger teams win more and more, they get stronger and stronger over time because more companies want to give them more money because they have more fans, and they get more tournament money. And this is a cycle that is never ending. For example, in the Estonian league, only 8 unique teams have ever played in the UEFA, which means that this is a really unbalanced situation in the sport currently. But secondly, how are players affected from this? We see that they would prefer to probably be in one team for a longer time. Why is this true? Firstly, they maybe live in that city and have some sort of life going on there. They might have a family there and they don't want to leave. But secondly, they have fans, they have a community behind them who have gathered around them and have grown into love with them. Thirdly, they have probably gotten used to their trainers, their coaches, and have made relationships with them. And fourthly, they have become just friends with their teammates as well. They would prefer to be in the local team. But why are then transfers happening between those teams? Why are they changing? Large reason is money. Those smaller and medium-sized teams don't pay enough to these sport athletes for the amount of work they're putting in. It feels kind of unfair. You're training and doing lots of things, but these smaller and medium teams just don't have the money to pay them accordingly. And also, athletes' careers are quite short, as I characterize, so they want to get enough money during their career to be well off later as well. This is what many athletes are feeling right now. They prefer to stay in a team, but money is the core reason as to why they are transferring. This leads to players staying in teams, in one team for less amount of time, and stronger teams getting stronger and stronger. What does this actually mean? Firstly, it means weaker fan connections. It means like community teams losing their star players due to the fans transferring away, and you're losing the one athlete that you were looking up to as a kid, and one thing that was holding your community team and making it so special and giving you those championships. At least this is what you felt like. But secondly, fans have overall a less of a connection with the players because it takes time to learn about the player. It takes time to grow into love with them. It takes time for them to win championships for your team, and just basic contact theory. The more you see them in your team shirt, the more you feel connected to them. So we say that fans feel more disconnected from their clubs and players in opposition's world. But secondly, we see that stronger teams are getting stronger and stronger, and as I explained. But what does this mean? It means that you already know who is winning this tournament. You already know that your maybe community team will lose, or that, and this means that it's just much more boring for fans. How do we alleviate this problem? I want to be really clear. We're not claiming that we will solve this issue entirely, but we're saying that we will make those issues much less worse. So firstly, players are more likely to stay in their club for a longer time. Why? Because they have, firstly, a certainty of a benefit that they will get in 5 years for staying in that team, but they also maybe get now enough money for the trade-off of whether I want to stay in that city or be for those fans, and the money is like more in balance, and you decide that this money is maybe not that important to you if you have enough of it, and the medium and small size teams can now also pay you. But secondly, it's more expensive for those bigger teams to poach players from medium and small size teams, because your new contract needs to include the money that this player is losing from transferring teams as well, which means that it's more expensive to poach people from teams. Now, probably not all players have those same incentives, but we say that a lot of those players do, and in this way we can alleviate this problem. What is the impacting of all of this? Firstly, we think that players who wanted to now can just stay in the club without having to think of money less and having their other interests being aligned. But more importantly, sports can now actually be more interesting for fans. Sports can be now more competitive comparatively to the opposition side, because maybe your community team isn't losing a star player, or just overall, like bigger clubs can have less of those players, and players themselves want to stay in those teams as well. But you also have, and this is important, Panel, you have a deeper connection. Fans have deeper connections with those players because they stay in those community clubs, and it doesn't even have to be community, just clubs for a longer amount of time, meaning they can have more meaningful experiences with them. And we are softening this problem. And now, before I move on, I want to take this POI.
You're characterizing players as their main incentive being financial. That means that Real Madrid will always be able to out-contract the amount of benefits that they're playing. They're not doesn't work.
No. I characterized it very clearly that players have all sorts of different incentives, and money is one of them. And they want to get enough money that they feel like the work that they have put in is enough. And but they also maybe want to stay with their teammates, they want to stay with their coaches and so on. If they feel like they're compensated fairly, then they can stay in that team. And at least some of the players will think this way. But second argument then on principle, why loyalty should be paid for. Firstly, on premise, we think that if you are an accomplished player, as the motion states, you probably contribute a lot, you work hard, you train probably almost daily, and you have devoted a lot of time for this team and for this league. But secondly, if they are accomplished, they probably have had opportunities like over 5 years to transfer to another team, as they want to say. You have maybe had 2 to 3 different contracts in this time. And please note that they have chosen not to take this opportunity. They have not chosen not to take this more money, and we think that they should be reparated for that. They have sacrificed potentially their own career and more money for this. Why is this important? Because A, players' worth grows over time, and the contribution to the team grows as they get stronger. But B, if they have not transferred, likely their compensation from the team is less than their effort that they're putting into this team. But why does the money then have to come from the league, not the team? Firstly, we see that also leagues benefit a lot from these players and their success, as I explained, by the fans getting more in touch with those players, and also just PR and stuff. But secondly, if the team pays, it comes from the expense of other players from the team who now lose this money. So this principle works on 2 levels. Firstly, you deserve reparation for the sacrifice of not having taken more money and staying for our community. But secondly, we can bring the balance of effort and payment closer for more teams and more players. For this reason, I'm so proud to propose. My preference, just loud and clear. Thank you.
Panel. Sport is about engagement and fan experience, and we will always have more of this on side opposition. Firstly, let me deal with Team Slovenia's insane characterization. Firstly, they tell you that, oh, this debate is going to be about the players who are making millions of dollars. Panel, nowhere in this motion does it say that this is only talking about the big leagues. This is going to always be a relative question where we talk about accomplished players in their respective leagues. And at that point, we're not going to be talking about, for example, an Estonian player in the Estonian league making millions of dollars, because that simply doesn't exist. Panel, there are simply maybe about 5 total football players who make $100 million every single year in the entire world. So I think that largely some of this characterization is out of the window. But secondly, they tell you that this is only about highly accomplished players. I think that this is also simply untrue. To be an accomplished player, it means that you are highly respected, that you go ahead and score goals, that you're not sitting on the bench, that you constantly get game time. And at that point, this is the characterization that we're talking about. If they expect that player to be someone who is literally at the top of the league and always scoring the most goals, this is simply also not in this motion, because that's how it is said. And secondly, notice how they tell you that players will not have the ability to decide, and now the leagues will be deciding how the players' careers play out for them. This is also literally insane, because we tell you that players will always have that ability to go ahead and switch teams and to decide to opt into this bonus if they wish to. Something that is always going to be on our side of the house, i.e. you won't get stuck in that club if you don't want to. If you want to play in that higher club, then you have the ability to do so. The thing that we are exclusively talking about on a side proposition here is simply the fact that now we give the players an ability to go ahead and, for example, be a part of their home club, instead of having to go ahead and go to a bigger club simply because they don't have any way to afford to live life otherwise. Now, I have two clashes in this debate, and then I'm also going to extend on the principle even more. So firstly, the first clash on how does this play out, and secondly, how does this affect fan experience. So let's look at what we got from opposition on the point of how does this play out. Firstly, I already dealt with their characterization, but they go ahead and tell you that the league is now going to lose a huge amount of money because they pay out all of these bonuses. Firstly, this is literally not real. We tell you that when they go ahead and tell you that, oh, this money would have otherwise been invested in, for example, youth academies, and for example, training fields, that this is simply untrue, because these things are funded by football federations, not leagues themselves. Have you ever heard of, for example, the Premier League funding some kind of a youth academy? That is simply not something that is existent. But secondly, we tell you that this is a flip to our side, because from the point that you increase fan experience by creating more connections, by having these players stay in their clubs for a longer time, it means that you're going to be, these fans are going to be succeeding together with these players. I.e., you go ahead and, for example, win games together with the player. You can celebrate together with the player. You win titles with that player. And at that point, that player's marketing value is going to drastically increase, because at that point you can tell a story, one of the most powerful tools you can use at marketing. And at that point, you're going to get more sponsorship. You're, for example, going to be able to sell more game jerseys, which is always going to bring in more money to the leagues. So this is literally a flip to our side. We're telling that the leagues are going to be gaining more and more money from this, simply because there is more fan engagement and hence more sponsorship value that you can earn from this. But secondly, let's look at the second point that they give you. They tell you that the players are going to not transfer, and this is going to be super bad. Firstly, these players have the ability to transfer, as I said before. But secondly, we tell you that these are accomplished players, something that they themselves characterize, which means that these players are likely to be someone who is in demand, which means that they can leave at any point. At that point, they're not going to get stuck in the club. They have the ability to leave. I.e., at that point, they are not going to be stuck in the club simply because they have no other means to do so. But thirdly, if they are a player who is not performing at that moment, then they're most likely going to get fired. I.e., it means that this fan culture will not go down, because if they aren't an accomplished player anymore, then at that point they're simply going to get fired at that point. This is not something that stands on their side. Now let's look at the things that we brought to you. We tell you that firstly, so let's look at the things that we brought to you. So firstly, we tell you that this is going to be something, this is going to play out as, for example, the player deciding to now go ahead and stay in their home club, because that's where they grew up and that's where they want to be. That's what they're most connected to, because that's literally where all of their childhood went by. And at that point, it means that most likely these players can now actually have the ability to opt into playing in that home club, simply because they have the financial capability. Because let's look at the comparative here. On their side, even if these players want to stay in their local clubs, they have simply no means to do so. Because at that point, if you don't have the money, if your local club doesn't pay enough money to go ahead, if your local club doesn't have enough money to go ahead and pay you a livable wage, then at that point this is going to compensate for it. And at that point, it's not going to be the tipping point where you have no other choice but to go to a bigger club in order to keep yourself alive, but rather you can still stay in that club. Now they tell you, now the final point that they tell you is that, all of the other clubs, bigger clubs, are going to be outbidding these players by salary. We tell you that this is extremely good, because firstly, notice how now these players have a bigger opportunity to get a bigger salary at another club if they wish to do so. But secondly, we tell you that largely, basically, sorry. Basically, we tell you that this will happen like largely anyway. All of these bigger clubs are going to be overbidding these players anyway. But the comparative here is very simple. That on our side, these bigger teams most likely won't be able to outbid the players all the time and take them out of their home clubs. And at that point, we get all of the experience that we talked about. Before I move on, really quickly.
How is it a better story if I just boring and stay in one club? It's cool if I go to one club to another club. I've overcome trade barriers. I've been betrayed. Everything has happened to me, and I'm still a winner.
Yeah, you're talking it in the context of a player. We're talking about the context of the fans. If you follow a specific club and a player for 7 years, then you're going to have a very meaningful connection, rather than if you follow them, for example, for 1 year. I don't understand what you're talking about. Let's really quickly talk about the second class that they really don't engage with. They really give you only their own argumentation about how this is going to be extremely boring because players stick around. I think that I already rebutted this, explaining that this is going to be a meaningful story that is created, and if the players don't perform, then they're most likely going to get fired. But we also give you a very in-depth analysis on how basically this creates, how does this actually create a collective identity within the players and the fans themselves. Because let's look at it this way: the more you stay with a certain group of people, then at that point you're going to be more connected to them. You learn more about them, and you accomplish more with these people. At that point, it means that these fans are going to be more connected because they understand that we have done a lot of good things together. But secondly, it also increases the chemistry of these teams, and I'll flag this as a point of extension because these players get to know each other a lot better. They get to understand the characteristics, and at that point, they're going to play a lot more in a much more performative way, where they go ahead and succeed more because they understand that, oh, we can do all of these cool things together. Let's look at Barcelona's tiki-taka, which only happened because they had a lot of chemistry together, something that never happens on their side of the house, where the players are going to be flipping from one club to another every single 1 to 2 years. So I think that largely this clash stands. But now let's look at the principle, and I'm going to flag this also as an extension. And explain why it's super important. The only response to tell you that to our principal point is that basically the clubs make the decision, which is already something that are rebutted. But let me extend. We tell you that we live in a capitalistic society where you go ahead and on our side of the house, as a player who wants to play in the local club, you're going to give up some of this money, which is the most valuable thing in this capitalistic world, in order to go ahead and increase the experience of the fans, in order to stay loyal to all of the coaches, all of the managers, all of the team captains that have trained you ever since you were a child. And at that point, the moment you do this, it means that you basically go ahead and make money for other people whilst not getting something in return because you had all of these opportunities. And at that point, it's simply principled to go ahead and give these people the money because they've sacrificed one of the most valuable things in our society in order to go ahead and give something back to everybody else. At that point, team proposition.
Okay, assuming that everybody's ready. Great. A couple of things in my speech. Firstly, I'm going to address the challenges on the framing that we get from the second. Then I'm going to talk about where the sports are more entertaining as a clash. Secondly, we're going to address the principle, take it out of the debate. And then I'm going to be bringing in new content about fans and prove how actually it's far worse in their comparative. People feel more disappointed and loyalty is gone. One, I want to address the challenge. They say that we set a difficult standard for highly accomplished players. I want to be very clear. If there's a low criteria for who is accomplished, and mind you, they say all I need to do is score a goal and be not on the bench, literally check your notes, I think that then it's not going to be having enough money, and all of Aida's harms are true. But then they say, this is different because the Estonian league will never pay off millions. Yes, of course, but this is relative. The Estonian league has lower budget, therefore they will be giving lower rewards, but still the issue is the same. They're still going to be depleting funds. This is still a harm. But furthermore, this is also a pretty bad concession because this means that it's even easier to buy out of the Estonian league because they will never give rewards as high as the Estonian players would love them to be if they did not move to another league. But the second challenge that they give you is, this is irrelevant because it's not the same funds. This just empirically isn't true. You have NBA youth funded by the league that goes to development of young players. You have infrastructure, you have stadiums, you have huge performances. The fact that all of this is getting funded, because the fact that, Kendrick Lamar performs at your game is a huge thing. It's going to get you a lot of fans, and you need a lot of money to get these fans in. This is how you make sports more entertaining. It's not just on the level level of the game. It's also on the level of the spectacle that you bring along. And this is going to happen at the level of really big tournaments that are going to be really, really important. The second thing that I want to deal with is their characterization of the players and show how they're making huge strategic mistakes. Number one, their prop one lays out that their main incentive is financial. Mind you, this needs to be true for their case to exist, because if I don't care about the financial reward, then none of the things that are happening that they're talking about is true. Then I want to be very clear. The comparative doesn't exist. Insofar as we quite literally tell you that Real Madrid will always be able to out-contract a bonus, even if it's in the biggest league of football. We tell you that all the other things, like this comparative, does not exist insofar as this is financial. But secondarily, and also very important, we tell you that clubs of that individual players often will not have the agency to do any of this, which means that not only are they not incentivizing the correct actor because they're not giving the money to the clubs to promise them that they will not trade, they're giving them to the players, which means that they're just throwing away money and not preventing any trade from happening. So we think that then the second thing that I want to talk about under this is that they say in response to my POI, oh no, we say that there's other incentives, like, I don't know, improvement, competitiveness, great, another great concession. This also gets better on our side of the house, because again, I will still be moving, because Real Madrid, yes, doesn't even need millions of contract to get a new young player, because wearing a Real Madrid jersey is the impact, is the incentive. They will always go to bigger clubs insofar as they're not changing the entire structure. They themselves in their rhetoric say, we're only slightly changing the problem, which means that insofar you're going to still have a structure where you're going to have top 5, top 10 clubs. This will always be the bigger incentive, even if nothing that I told you before is true. But even if everything on finance is true, I want to flip them. And I want to say that what they say is really, really bad. I think that this gives excuse for clubs to underpay young talent, because they now can offset the contracts on bonuses. I think this is bad. The bonus is only a one-time reward, and it gives a bargaining tool to big clubs when young talent, they say, just stay with us for 5 years, we're going to be giving you low contracts, because they can now abuse this idea of getting a reward later. I think this is bad. We want good contracts for players that contribute a lot to the game. We think that they deserve this on the level of how much they contribute. Secondly, let's talk about where sports is more entertaining. I'm dealing with their best case when there's no concentration and everything is perfectly distributed. This is bad. One, you get one good, really amazing player on a bad team. I think that this is not just boring what Ida outlines for you. I think this is ridiculously frustrating. I think me having to constantly watch Luka Doncic be engaged when he's trying his absolute hardest and the team just isn't picking it up is super frustrating for me as a player. I don't want to watch the game anymore. I'm not just bored, I want to quit, and I don't want to be a fan anymore, and I'm upset that he's not getting traded and not playing well. Secondly, I think stacked finals are significantly better. I already outlined to you that there's a bigger spectacle in outrounds, that there's more happening in outrounds. I can still enjoy, even if there's stacked teams at the very top, because there's still competition between Barcelona and between Real Madrid. Even if they're both stacked, there's still a competition happening on a different level. And we think that this one is better because it's more sensational, it's at higher stakes. But thirdly, I want to say that we have alternative engagement. They talk about fans losing their loyal fans and stuff like that. I think this isn't as important. I think that if you're a fan of a smaller club, of a club that is considered to be quite bad, I'm not expecting them to ever get to the finals, which means that I'm not upset that they're not playing as well, because there's a different driving incentive between me enjoying the sport on their level. I'm either motivated by the fact that it's my nation, it's my nationality. I'm either motivated by the fact that people from my village gather in the same hotel, well, not hotel, in the same bar or something, and we watch the sport together. I do not have to have amazing players be kept in my team for me to enjoy and engage, because we can engage on a different level. Secondly, then, before I go into my content, I want to talk about their idea of, yeah, sure, I can take it now.
Yeah, so if you're a Luka Doncic fan, then you're most likely going to be mad at Luka Doncic if he underperforms, not only in Celtic, but maybe in Celtic and Golden State Warriors. I think you're going to be sad either way.
I think you are... I'm going to get this in my case, but I think you're most upset when Luka Doncic is only staying there for money for 5 years and then he goes off to the Lakers. But then let's talk about their principle. I think that firstly, they make a huge strategic mistake on that ground, because they say that loyalty should be paid. Note, they say it because it is a big trade-off, because I need to refuse a lucrative contract to prove my loyalty, and they want to recognize this. This is an implicit concession that you are very much able to trade off the money and trade off the contract if you are truly loyal. What this means for their their case is that they're not really rewarding loyalty, because everybody had the opportunity to truly be staying loyal, which is why this is the same on our comparative. We don't know who they're rewarding. We think that true loyalty persists only when there's no financial incentive allowed. But secondly, I think that we can still flip this and we see that this gets even worse. I think that you are rewarded for loyalty. I think that Doncic was gonna get a statue. He was gonna be immortalized with Mavericks. He has fans who love him. I think that at the point of which you're a rich player, you're well off, you have the trophies, the most important and impactful thing is not the bonus from your league. It's the fact that your fans love you. It's the fact that you're never gonna get forgotten. This is the true incentive, and it is uniquely on our side of the house that you are more willing to stay purely for your loyalty. So I think their principle is defeated because nobody likes it. Lastly then, I want to talk about our content, about fans and how you diminish their sense of loyalty. No, you always want to believe as a fan that athletes care about you, that they're loyal to you. You want to buy their merch, you want autographs, you're watching them, you're cheering for them. You feel like you have put in an investment, in timely investment, a costly investment, but most importantly, emotional input, when you are there with them through everything. What you want then is good treatment back. Prop diminishes that perception, because then, firstly, this kicks in their best case when the athlete has all the agency to make the decision. Now there's speculation. Now you never know for the period of the 5 years if the player is there because they like you and they appreciate what you do as a fan, or because they're waiting for their bonus and then they're gonna hop the club. I think that this is truly, truly bad, because at least for 5 years, for when this club is emerging, for this player is emerging, they have to concede to the fact that fans will feel less joy. Fans will always be speculating whether I'm being abused for my monetary gain or whether my player truly loves me. I think that this is a diminishing impact. I think that we cannot enjoy the game as much. But on the second layer, I think that when the player indeed gets traded or switch clubs, be it of their own volition or not on their own volition, there is a huge feeling of betrayal, because the club supported you. It made you a good player. It made you qualify for the award, and then you feel like your support has been abused because now they got traded or now they switched the club. And now you truthfully feel most betrayed than you ever will be. On their side of the house, fans will never be happy in any regard. Putting in monetary incentive when the sport is supposed to be about joy is the worst thing that they can do for this debate.
Three things in the speech. One on league funding, two on how fans perceive sports, and lastly on the principle. On the league funding, I think this has been a kind of he said, she said debate so far, where one side says that, hey, leagues are going to pay for it, the other says, no, teams pay for it. Let's actually mechanize why our characterization is more likely to be true and why leagues are not so important in paying for stadiums, right? Panel, note that you as a team always have an inherent incentive to want to pay for things like academies, right? Why? Because you want to have first pick at the players. You want to actually raise them in a specific way so they align with the way that you want your team's players to play. If you're an offensive club, you want to have offensive players, so you're going to try and train specifically attackers in your academy. On stadiums and things as well, you probably want to own these things because you get unique benefits from owning them, right? I can decide how my gym looks, so all my players train there. I can choose when I have training times for my team instead of having to actually make deals with the league on when I can use this specific stadium, so on and so forth. At that point, you have an inherent incentive to want to be the one to put money into this. But even if you don't believe this, and even if leagues are paying for it, then note, I think leagues are pretty rich already, and this is comparative, we agree with that, but they are like comparatively quite rich. Why is this true? One, they literally tax everything that has to do with this league. They get money for the beer that they sell at the sports games, right? They probably get some amount of money for the tickets that they sell. There are sponsorship deals that are signed specifically with the leagues themselves, right? At which point it is unclear why this amount of money is going to be shocking for them, especially if they want to tell you this is going to be some specific amount of players. Then why they cannot pay these bonuses remains unclear, and what actual negative impacts of this are out of this debate. But I think the biggest clash then in this debate is what happens with fans and how they perceive these sports. Let's talk about that. One, why does competitiveness matter as a whole, and what does it matching look like? I don't think that an average fan is looking for the greatest game they can possibly watch. You don't always want to see the 10 best players versus the 10 best players in the world, because otherwise nobody would be watching any of the second, third leagues or any of the lower level games, right? What you actually have to have is for you to believe that the game matters, that there is some possibility of you winning, there is some possibility of an upset. Our characterization in our case in this debate is that the more good players leave from teams, the less likelihood there is of you ever winning, and the more detached you become from it. When they tell you that in France nobody watches games where PSG doesn't play, this is probably true. Why? Because they don't have anything to do anyway. And in most of those middle league games that they tell about, which have low viewer rates, that's because there's nothing interesting to even watch. There are no players you can track because those players have already left. This is just bottom of the barrel. Why then do a few unique players, why even even one talented player on a team can make a massive difference, because they can make interesting plays. They can probably turn the tide alone. They can rally teams behind them. Like Luka, when he played on that basketball team, was an incredibly successful person and actually led them alone. After they traded him off, that team has completely cratered and done nothing good since then, right? What I'm telling you here is that talent does inherently matter, and having them on your team is already good. Secondly, why does caring matter? They actually agree to this completely, right? You are invested to them. You need to think about them. You actually have to care about these people specifically. Their entire extension is true here, right? But the problem with their extension then is that they don't actually prove to you why people are likely to think that, hey, they're getting money for being here, therefore they don't love me, really. Because every football player anyway is getting money. Every sports person anyway is getting paid money to be on a team, right? You already know that. But the thing is, all that betrayal, all that harm that comes when someone leaves your team is just inherently more likely to happen on their side of the house, because people are inherently more likely to leave the teams. And this is our main case here that they don't actually respond to. We aren't saying that no one is ever going to leave. We aren't saying that Madrid cannot buy any of the players, right? There's a nuance here. It becomes more expensive to buy them, and you as a player have an easier time opting out of being sold. Why? One, because to the extent that we characterize it, that money matters, because you as a sports person have an unclear future in sports. It can end at any injury. You probably only work for 10 years. You need to make enough to be self-sustainable, right? At that point, any amount of extra money that you're going to be getting is going to be an extra cent in the weighing that I can probably stay on this team and enjoy the fans I already like and the loyalty that I already like here, without having to actually jeopardize my potential future. But secondly, and this is the thing that they literally never respond to, even if this isn't true and you still get both, at least these teams are getting more money for it. What does this mean? They can buy on average better teams, or they can pay other players to actually stay on their team because they can give more lucrative contracts in key situations. Meaning that even if everything is the same, at least there is a better transferring of money. But note one more piece of nuance. If it is more expensive to buy good players for good teams, then they can just also quantitatively buy less good players, right? Which means that it's more likely that someone is going to remain simply because you won't have enough capital to pick up every single good player, because the math on it changes. You have to actually account for the contract. Meaning that we always prove that it's far likelier on our side for these teams to have more good players, or more players who are potentially going to do something, meaning that games are more interesting, you are more invested, but also that you have a longer amount of time to build connections with players. Because note, even if the games are bad, like they tell you, even if all of that works, as long as you as a fan care about them and have fun going to the pub, like they tell you, then that means that you're still going to support them and find enjoyment from the sport. For this, you need to have people who stay on a team for a long time. That is inherently more likely on our side. On inherent weighing, we win this clash, and therefore the debate as well. Before I move on, I'll take that POI.
Luka plays in the Lakers now. People who loved him before still follow him now, but it doesn't mean that Dallas becomes less interesting, because it's part of your identity, part of your local, and where you have all the analysis that we give and you don't engage on.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I can respond to that as well. Why you can't support someone anymore? Because as we said in our first speech, football is a zero-sum game. For now, you to support Luka, every time Luka wins, that has to come at the cost of you probably losing at some point, right? Therefore, you supporting him is going to be bad. But secondly, if their entire characterization on betrayal is true, that we trained that person, we supported him all these years, and we allowed him to get to this point, then that even further proves why you cannot support him at the point where he leaves, because he has decided to go away from you. Their own characterization is intention. Lastly, on the principle, the only responses that they give you they give you two responses. One, that at the point where you're signing, you have no agency, therefore this principle doesn't stand. Yes, at the point where you sign, you don't have any agency, but at the point where an accomplished athlete, at the point where you can choose to leave, when you've been on a team for 4 years, at that point you do have agency. This is a non-rebuttal. The second point here is that you are being rewarded with loyalty in and of itself, and this is a good thing, and therefore you do not need money. We can agree that loyalty is also some sort of reward and benefit that you are getting, but as we tell you, that money is a unique benefit here, because it shows you that you are actually valuable and that you are valued in doing this thing. We live in a capitalist state where the money that we get directly equates to our quality of life and the things that we do in our life, right? At which point, you being paid by the league specifically, not by anybody else, but the league in and of itself, shows that you are valued, that you have created something here. No, this goes even further from this. It has to be the league that pays you. We characterize you. Because if the team tries to pay you more, or if the team tries to show you that we care about your loyalty, then that has to come at the expense of something. If a team is paying, they have more limited resources than the league, at which point they have to pay less to other players, or they have to pay less to upkeep their facilities. That is the point where a negative impact of others being unfairly impacted by this realizes. On the weighing of this principle, we tell you that this is a question of identity. Whether the sacrifice that you made to opt into that team, to get less other financial resources, or less success, right? Because you could have gone to Madrid and probably won the La Liga, but you haven't done that. You have given up some amount amount of legacy that you could have gotten from that at the expense of staying on this team because you care about them or you are somehow invested for them. At that point, we give that person a higher level of access to the things that he should be getting. Because paying for a team for 5 years always requires a sacrifice, and there has to be some amount of reward given for that sacrifice. At the end of this debate, here's where we bring you. One, we have the most realistic characterization on how leagues work, therefore most of their main impacts are mitigated or don't work at all. Secondly, on fans and competitiveness, we actually analyzed how you view the game in and of itself, what do you need to enjoy a game, and why we are always more likely on our side of the house to be able to give that to a person. Lastly, on the principle which you don't really want to engage with, we proved to you why it is inherently correct to pay people more for the work that they give you. All of these reasons are proud to stand in proposition.
Three things in the speech. I'll deal with the principle right away. Secondly, you're going to get on finance. We're winning this content. You're going to get a bunch of weighing as to why it's the most important. A long clash on entertainment after. Let's talk about the principle. 2 layers under this clash. Firstly, on why it's not your choice to get traded. Therefore, this is a principle that is not targeting the right people. And secondly, as to if money is actually the right thing to repay people with. 3 reasons as to why it's not your choice to be traded and why it's not in your hands. Therefore, we shouldn't be rewarding it. 1, teams have leverage over you. This is because they are the ones who made you into the star player that you are. Sure, you have some of your own skill. I'm not saying that you're a completely blank sheet. You're not. But teams are the ones who have given you facilities. Teams are the ones who gave you the ability to play in the first place. They can use this as leverage over you to tell you, hey, we're not going to trade you. We made you. We are going to make decisions over you. Second, you're under a contract. I literally sign away the rights to myself as a player to my team. They have legal rights to give me to other teams or to not give me to other teams. I'm only in their hands. Thirdly, I am an investment made by the team. They have put all this money into me. They are going to decide when this investment is no longer lucrative. It is only in their hands to decide, oh, now I am becoming too expensive, therefore I will trade you now, or oh, I am now not worth my money anymore, therefore I'm going to send you to a different team. For all of these reasons, that is likely that teams are going to stake control over their own players over them. What can players do to try and be charitable and realistic to side proposition here? They're likely to be able to only pressure the team into trying to trade them away. What does this mean? It means that they never actually have the full decision on when they get traded, and a principle on loyalty doesn't actually work because it is not their loyalty that is being rewarded. It is the luck that the team didn't trade them. Secondly, questioning the second premise of the principle, is money actually a good benefit to pay people back? 2 responses to this. 1, even if we live in a capitalist society, a decent amount of sports people have a decent amount of money either way, meaning they're going to be able to survive. Second, they already get money in different ways. They get paid by contracts. This is their reward. They're employees who are paid for the work that they do. I don't know why they need to be compensated extra for just doing the work for a bit of a longer time. Thirdly, there are other ways outside of money that you already get repaid in. Nikola Jokic is one of the most loved people in Denver, Colorado because he stayed there. I don't know why this isn't a good point of repayment, that every time he goes out into the street, everybody says, I love you, you're the best thing ever. I think this is a very tangible thing for him that also makes him happy, so I don't know why the principle can only be fulfilled by money. This argument doesn't stand in this debate. Secondly, let's talk about finance. We do a lot of work on this and we're clearly winning on this content because there's only one response which actually gives you. To tell you at the start of the speech, teams want to do things as well, therefore this argument doesn't stand. They give you like 3 mechs. All of these mechanisms work for the league as well, maybe they're just not going to be as targeted. Instead of training your best aggressor or whatever, or your best power forward, you're just going to train good football players. NBA Euros, for example, exist. The NBA invested into Africa actively to develop their talent. Embiid came from there. You have a bunch of new players coming in from Africa who are actively benefiting from the NBA's investment program in there. It goes same for leagues like UEFA or whatever other football leagues you need because they want to develop as much talent as possible to later on join their leagues. They can only do this on Arsenal to the degree that they can because we do not waste the money. Why is this argument really important on weighing here? Because we're winning this content, I'm going to now tell you why it's the most important either way. 1, even if this is a small amount of money, which 1 means their case also becomes really, really tiny because they can pay out a bunch of players, it is still a better use of money than handing out loyalty checks. This is because we're going to get net 1, bet more athletes in the world because kids can now go into these sports programs, have fun while playing sports. You have people who are going to be able to watch these kids develop, watch the kids in the future, partake in their own sports all across the world. Well, on their side of the house, the main benefit they're getting out of any clash they're trying to run is going to be people in the broad scale are going to have either a bit more fun or the players are going to feel a bit more rewarded. Because we're actually developing people, allowing them to have fun now while playing the sport, being healthier or whatever, and in the future, you're going to have have, even if it's a very marginal amount of money, a more important and larger impact on finance than absolutely anything else in this debate, meaning that at this point in the debate we're already winning. Let's talk about the second and largest or third largest clash then on entertainment. There's going to be a bunch of premises to this, so I'm not going to count how many there is. One, on why big clubs are entertaining. They have two main premises. This is one of them. They tell you that they are not, and they hog other players. Three main reasons. One, having the best players is inherently entertaining because I like watching people do impressive things. When Ja Morant jumps up really high and dunks a ball really, really hard, this is like, hey yo, wait, I can't do that. That's sick. I want to watch more of that. It's really, really cool when I have a bunch of these really good people passing the ball to each other as well. Because not only can Ja Morant do a dunk, LeBron can pass it up to him and then he dunks it. That's also really cool. I like doing this and I like watching the interactions between the best players. So I actually like teams consuming, that's not the right word, but collecting all the other good players and concentrating them at the top. Secondly, you have better competition than you do on their side of the house. There's a couple of things they try to tell you here. They say, everyone can be competitive because teams can keep the lower level players. No, this is not true. You're going to be competitive on like a mid-level. We're going to be competitive on the best level. They're going to have teams like Real, Barca, PSG, whatever, or the Lakers, OKC, Denver, who are going to be competing against each other with the best teams, with the highest level of play, where the outcome is so incredibly uncertain because both of the teams are so incredibly good, they're going to be on the edge of your seat, eating your popcorn the entire time, not knowing what's going to happen. This is where real excitement comes from. Thirdly, there is unique drama, a mechanism Ida already gives you. I'm going to develop it further. I've done this with the other two mechs as well, but whatever. Firstly, on beef, you can now uniquely see how players are going to interact with each other in a team. Whether this is positive or negative doesn't matter. It's cool to me. I like watching it. Secondly, the trade itself is an entertaining thing to do because there could be drama with it. Think about the Luka Doncic trade. What did this entire premise prove to you? Two things. One, big clubs are generally likely to be good because we get more entertainment from them. Two, the act of trading itself is likely to be a good thing. Therefore, any sort of benefits they want to stake from just keeping players in the same room or on the same team are unlikely to manifest. They have three main reasons, or they have a couple of reasons as to why this is still likely to be a good thing. The second premise of this clash on why fans are likely to be happy. One, they tell you fans are going to make a connection with a player once a player stays on a team for a very long time. Before I move on, if there's still a POI.
Yes, I'm very confused by the highest level of play is likely to not work anymore. A high level of competitiveness works on either side of the question.
Yeah, but we have more people competing at a higher level because teams like suck them up or whatever, like collect them. We both admit to this mechanism working. Either way, why is there likely to not be as strong of a connection on their side of the house? Entire argument in Lara's speech as to why this is likely to be the case. You perceive people as less loyal. This is going to not work for players like LeBron James. Sure, he's always going to be perceived as loyal. Or like Curry. This is going to work for emerging players specifically. This is why the engagement coming from Whip isn't actually effective on this argument. No, isn't actually effective on this argument. Because note, it is emerging players in their first 5-year tenure who could be exciting to watch, like Doncic in 2017, like Trae Young in 2017, like Lillard in 2013, who are now going to be thought of as not as loyal but might just be staying for the money. The response to this, but players stay for the money either way because they get contracts. The unique part of this argument is that we now attach an extra stake to the money they have on their side of the house, or sorry, a stake to loyalty. Now it's not just the fact that you're staying there to be paid, you're staying there exclusively, like your loyalty is there only for the money, where before your loyalty was there because you were loyal, because you couldn't get the money in another team, but now you can't because you need to stay there for 5 years. This means the perception of loyalty is worse on our side of the house and the connection they actually want to make with their fans doesn't stand. What does this mean for all of their content? It means it is unlikely you're going to be able to follow the story or form the connection that they want to make with their players, which means the fan enjoyment coming from actually watching all of these players is unlikely to be as big as it could be on our side of the house. This is why this argument is really important and a really good flip of whatever content they give you. What do I leave you with in this speech then? Three main things. One, throw out the principle instantly. It doesn't matter in this debate. Secondly, we tell that finance, the most important impacts we very, very clearly win on because they don't respond to them properly, are going to have a huge impact on the entirety of society. And thirdly, we tell you that fan enjoyment is like to be much higher on our side of the house once you have more competitive game, more entertaining players. The scale of all of the impacts and intensity of them go to us very clearly. This is super clear going with opposition.
The set of propositions struggles immensely with strategy in this round because they keep shifting between what the main incentive of the players is, because they realize if it is finance, like they say their first prop, then there's no comparative because you can always be bought out. And then when we we challenge them and we say, and then they change and they say, but there's other incentives like competitiveness and prestige and your fans, then we also co-opt all of these benefits. No matter what they do in this round, they've lost just based on strategy. One, I want to be clear, their model doesn't work. Firstly, it's because they're incentivizing the wrong actor. Throughout this bench, we give you analysis as to why it's unlikely that the player will actually ever be able to decide to stay. And insofar as the club making the decision, because you're their employee, because you have coercive power over them, etc., means that what's going to take priority in the factoring in when trading is going to happen is, are you a good business investment for the club, not for yourself? Are you going to be making them a lot of money, or are you not? This means that it doesn't matter if they give $10 million to the player if the player cannot decide to stay because it's better business for Real Madrid to sell him to Barca. Secondly, they can always be bought out. And then they say, no, but because they have this mechanism of they cannot give as lucrative of contracts all the time, but their own concession is that we're going to be talking about the highest level teams. So of course, yeah, probably some mid-level team cannot give as lucrative of a contract to prevent this, but guess what? Real Madrid can, Barca can, and PSG can. Then I want to do 3 questions, 1 on entertainment, 2 on fans, and 3 on the harms of losing money. Please note, dear panel, all of this is occurring on their very best case when their model works, even though they never prove it. On entertainment, we give you a very clear case as to why concentration of the best players is good. We outline 2 main things. 1, we say that competitiveness happens then at the highest level because you have a spectacle, you have the sponsors, you have most watches, and you have performances. Then they say in the POI, but this stays the same because big clubs remain big clubs. But this is not engaging with the core of our mechanization, because we tell you that you need more good players to interact between each other. There's nothing more cool and nothing better than Ronaldo and Lamine Yamal playing against each other. This is when you can talk about it in host shows. This is when you can make a big deal out of this. This is when it's most entertainment, just because of the cults of personalities that these people have. You need to have multiple of these teams to have this competition at this level. But secondly, it's also what Alex talks to you about. It's about the specific benefit of interactions between players, not just on the level of personalities engaging in this being interesting to watchers, but the very fact that this takes the game to the next level. Because the more good players you have, the better the game is going to be. That's why every single player that is not in Barca, Madrid, and the top 10 teams is a loss on their side of the house and is less entertainment. What does Proposition respond? They say, but one player can rally a team behind them, therefore this one player is really important, even for bad clubs. I think that this is still not engaging, because we tell you that you cannot create a game by yourself. We tell you that then it becomes even worse for fans. They have to watch talent go to waste and have to watch everything happen badly. Secondly, I want to talk about fans. Proposition says that you cannot form connections with players because they get traded before this. One, if this is true, then the trade hurts nobody. If I didn't care about my player in the first place, then why am I hurt by ours trading them? But secondly, I think that we show you that you have other ways to connect. That is to say, there's no harm of this engagement that they want to claim, because then I'm not into a club just because of one player, but because it's in my nationality, or it's because of my local community. Literally, Barcelona is not there because of one player, it's there because they have museums and fans and jerseys that are really significant. And even if this happens the same on smaller level, because then it's even more important that you engage your other incentives rather than just a good player, because you do not have as many good players, which means that this engagement doesn't happen. Our content then gives you, 1, fans speculate. There's uncertainty versus certain undying love, because when news and talk shows and YouTubers are going to be saying you're only there for the money, the fans are going to latch on and they're going to have less emotional fulfillment. Never responded from their side. But secondly, we also tell you about the fact that fans truly feel betrayed when they leave. And it's just easier for me to believe that a person left because now they got their bonus, because I'm super upset and I want to find guilt. And I think that I feel significantly better on our side of the house when I know my love is the reward, when I know players don't need financial compensation for loyalty. My love is enough. Thank you.
Panel, let me dismantle this debate through two questions. Firstly, how is this implemented and how? And secondly, what are the impacts of this? So let's look at this first question, how is this implemented and how? So let's look at this at its face value. Team opposition wants to tell you, firstly, that this will be super expensive because this will happen like at the top level, and how this will be like millions of dollars and super, super expensive, and how players are going to want more challenge. So first of all, Panel, this is a very, very gross misconception on their side, where they completely wrongly characterize this debate. Firstly, we already mentioned in second and third how this is going to be a question of relativity. This motion implies that a local league is paying this, not that you're going to be paid by the La Liga, for example, if you're paying in the Estonian league. This can mean millions for that La Liga, but also this can mean just a few thousand euros, for example, for a local Estonian league. But also, notice how this means not a single league is going to end because of this. One of the main things that they push in this debate is that, oh, this is going to make you lose out on a Ronaldo versus Lamine Yamal battle. I really don't see what is the comparative here, because these two leagues are not going to go ahead and clash with each other, i.e. at that point the La Liga, for example, La Liga is not going to be paying the money for example, the Estonian player, and at that point I don't see how these two things are in correlation. But secondly, we also tell you the players have really little say on how this will play out. This is something that is dictated by the leagues, and it's something like a bonus, not your salary itself, i.e. at that point we tell you that the leagues will be setting the amount of money in place, and players cannot negotiate for this, something that we already highlighted. But thirdly, we tell you that when they go ahead and tell you that, oh, this will go ahead and cut funding from other things, this is something where we very well characterized in second and third, how leagues do not fund, for example, youth academies or sporting facilities. This is something that is done by football federations and the clubs themselves, and especially because they actually have the incentive to do so. So I think that I've dealt with the characterization, but let's look at their actual point that they have here. They tell you that, oh, the teams are going to take control of the players, and this is going to be like players losing out. But now, what is the comparative here? Because on their side of the house, you also sign away your rights as a player anyway, because but we tell you that players can also decide, something that we already highlighted. The players have the ability to opt into this bonus and decide if they want to stay for 5 years, and also if they want to go to another club. If anything, we tell you that this gives the player more control, because you can be more stable, that you're not going to lose your job as a, for example, football player, simply because you have that stable job. And at that point, we tell you that firstly, their characterization is dealt with, and secondly, players actually do have control. But now, what are the actual impacts of this? So let's see what we gave you in on-site proposition. Firstly, we gave you the point of having better competition. Why? Because no longer is there a tipping point where you go ahead and ditch your home club because you don't have enough money to go ahead and live. Realistically, we tell you that you're going to move on either side of the house, your players are going to be going from one club to another. But realistically, it means that now some players are going to have less incentive to do so, because now they have more money playing in their local club. And it's the second thing that we tell you, that there's going to be we tell you that there's going to be more connection between the fans and the players, but also the teams and the players themselves. And this simply happens because connections are built on being together for a long time, accomplishing things together, having shared memories. At that point, it means that firstly, the fans are going to be more connected, and secondly, it means that the teams are more likely to have good chemistry, for example, and do cool things together, to be more in unity, to do all of these awesome things together. And at that point, we tell you that this is simply going to lead to a bigger experience. Now, what does this, and how does this actually flip their entire point about finance, which is literally the only core of their argumentation? Because all of this that I just told you equals more money, because from the point that your league has more entertainment value through more competition and more connection, it means that more sponsorships are going to be made because fans engage more, because it is more interesting. But also, you're going to, for example, buy more jerseys of that certain player because you feel like you're more connected to them. Instead, on their side of the house, that player is going to move away from their club, and in that case, you're never going to make that connection, never going to buy that jersey, and it's always going to be a league dominated by only the big teams, and at that point, there's going to be less of this engagement value. And at that point, we tell you that this point is flipped, and that this simply falls to our side, where you have more of this finance, where this is going to make lives better for the players, but also for the league itself, and we win on this clash as well. For all of these reasons, side proposition.